Alright, welcome to another video on how to secure yourself financially. Because I was looking at the beginner guide to financial statement made by sec.gov. This beginner guide to financial statement made by the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission. So in this case, and in this section, they mentioned that reading, if you're able to read nutritional labels or baseball or soccer box score, you can learn to read basic part of financial statement. And if you can follow a recipe or apply for a loan, you can learn to read the basic of accounting. And the basic, they're not difficult. They are rocket science. So after all, this financial statement, they show you the money, period. The same as the Cuba Gooding Jr. Immortal Lines from Jerry Maguire movie, show me the money. That's what financial statements do. And there are four types of them. Balance sheet that show what the company owns and what it owns at a fixed point in time. So balance sheet, the TLDR, is a snapshot of the company assets, liabilities, and shareholders' equity over a period of time. Income statement would show how much money a company made and spent, and the bottom line of this show is if a company earned money or not. And the cash flow statement, which shows you the exchange between the company and the outside world of money. And lastly, we have is the shareholder or the statement of the shareholder, which is something that in this section they don't mention and they don't discuss, but it's important to know that that exists. And this statement of the shareholder shows the change on interest over time. So because I was looking right now at the cash flow statement, okay, where now the cash flow is a report the company inflow and outflow of cash, and it is important because company needs to have cash to pay its expense and purchase assets. So while the income statement can tell you whether a company made a profit, the cash flow statement can tell you whether a company generated cash over a period of time, and it reused some of the information from the balance sheet and the income statement, where the bottom line of this show the net increase or decrease of money. So the cash flow statement analyze the cash from one of these activities: operating, financing, and investing. So operating, what it does is analyze the net income from the income statement and conciliate with the total cash that was used or perceived from operating assets or for operating activities. Okay, so what are the most common operating activities? I ask myself, well, you have operating assets and operating liabilities. Operating assets we have is accounts receivable, inventory, property, plant, and equipment, prepay expense, which is money that you have to pay in advance for good or service, such as insurance premium, like health for medical coverage, life in the event of the policy or in the event of the policyholder's death, your car, your home, liabilities, for example, in lawsuits, disability that prevent you from work, and long-term care like home health care, or nurse home care or nurse health care. Another prepaid expense is maintenance contract, software license, office supplies, marketing, rent, and keep looking at other operating assets is intangible assets, which is our assets that have value but they are not physical, such as patents, which is exclusive right to inventors so they can sell, manufacture, and distribute that invention over a period of time. For example, we have is the maglev from the popular mechanic website, where they show you is the top 15 patent in the world, or the top 15 most popular patent in the world. And they have is maglev is one of them. This electromagnetic suspension and stabilization system for ground vehicles, issued in 1969. Um, issued in 1969. GPS, this navigation system using satellites with passing ranging technique, issued in 1973. The electronic device like the iPhone issued in 2007, and the CRISP gene editing in 2014. Another intangible asset is copyrights, which are image, audio, or design that uniquely identify your competition from the rest. So, for example, Michael Burry and their famous were "Let's Get Ready to Rumble." Another intangible asset is that was trademarks, copyrights, which are exclusive rights to original creators, or creator of original works, to distribute and sell their inventions, like Netflix, Spotify, McDonald's. Trade secrets, which are confidential data that company use to gain competitive advantage from a process, formula, or customer list of other companies. And goodwill, very very important, because it's your reputation, your brand recognition, which is, I think goodwill is one of the most underrated intangible assets that ex- a lot of people, but not companies. So company, they know that the goodwill. Company know the goodwill, and it is a way to check, to keep check ourselves about our decisions that impact the rest of the world. Okay, but that's the reason why a lot of people use the politics for that, the BR. But in any case, goodwill is another intangible asset. Keep looking at other operating assets. We have investment in affiliates, right? Like joint ventures, which are a partnership between two companies or more to undertake a specific business activity or project, where each part receive a share of the joint venture, like Crocs and Post Malone. Equity investments, where now a company may purchase significant stake on the another company's stocks, with the potential to raise their voice in the another company management decisions. For example, Berkshire Hathaway, led by Warren Buffett, which is an investment multinational conglomerate holding company, that invest in a variety of sectors like energy, industry, energy, home, home care, energy, real estate, and retail. And holding company, after all, they mean uh, is a parent company that engage with another company through owning stocks, through owning the other company stocks. So they don't engage in different in operations directly. They engage is through stocks. So they own stocks on the another company. This is part of these legal structure, financial and legal structures. Okay, because with that, right? Uh, I also look at other examples like SoftBank, which is a Japanese conglomerate that invests in primarily a technology companies like Uber, WeWork. Yeah, funny thing of WeWork. Alphabet, the parent Google company that invests in a variety of technology company as well as SoftBank through its venture capital arm called Google Ventures. And for example, you have Calico, this longevity company, as well as TPG, the Texas Pacific Group, which is a private investment firm that invests in a variety of sectors like real estate, home or healthcare. And then I also look at associates, which is companies or is investor that purchase significant or possess significant stake on the another company, something between the 20 to 50%. This is associate and limited partnership, where now investors that exchange is company or investors that invest in this limited partnership in exchange of stocks to gain some control over the limited partnership assets and operations. So you have to be careful with that. So after that, I also look at other operating assets like money and, or cash and cash equivalent, like uh, money market funds. But after all, they is uh, funds were now purchased very where they purchase very high risk product with short term very they so money market funds purchase product with high risk with very short term life, such as bank acceptance debt or such as bank acceptance debt from banks and certificate of deposit, which are certified of the savings issued by banks with short-term maturity, as well as commercial papers, risky and unsecured commercial debt or company debt, and repo, repurchase agreement, government debt. So with that, this is all of the operating assets. And then I look at the operating liabilities, where now here you have is accounts payable, money that you own to your vendors and providers, suppliers, with a short term debt, like 30 to 60 days. And then, uh, for example of this, accounts payables are supplier raw, office supplies, service. Then I look at prepay X. Then I look at accrue expense, which are expense that a company incur to enjoy for good and service, uh, which has not yet paid for, like uh, like mm, 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 how, okay, this is accrue expense. Okay, expense that a company incur to, yeah, accrue expense. Expense that a company incur for good and service that has not been yet paid for, such as wage and salaries, taxes, rent, utility bills. And the subtle difference between the accrue expense and accounts payable is that one is money that you own to suppliers and vendors, while at the other are expense that you have made for your operations or your day-to-day activities. Also, I look at the deferred revenue, which are obligations that a company incur to provide for money that has been collected. In other words, is, for example, Netflix, once you as a user subscribe to their service, for example, in a year, that's an accrue, that's a deferred revenue, because now they have is to provide that service 24/7. So the availability of that service must be there for a year, right? So this is deferred revenue. Uh, Another example is gift cards as well. And then I look at operating, exactly, so accounts payable, accrued expense. In Spanish, this is gasto acumulado, deferred revenue, or eh, ingresos diferidos in Spanish. Then I look at income tax payable. Okay, and this, well, money that a company owns to the government based on your income, how much money you made, and a tax rate. So you have is corporate tax income, or corporate tax, which often right now is up to 21%, roughly speaking, depending on the type of or corp. Also, you have is uh, something important here: income tax payable. income tax payable. Okay, withholding taxes. Sorry. Withholding taxes, which are money that the employee deduct from the gross wage employee's salary. There's a difference between employer, employees. Okay, so money that an employer deduct from the gross wage with the gross employee's salary to pay to the government. So the whole idea of this withholding taxes is to fight, from the government perspective, is to fight evasion and use the system pay as you go, right? Pay as you earn to pay taxes. So to avoid be on the end of the tax year and have to pay huge amount of taxes, right? And the sale taxes, and then the sale tax is money that a company is subject to any time it sells something. So you have is example of this sale tax. Okay, example of sale tax is state sale tax on the U.S. City or county sale tax, value added tax, which in some countries, including many in Europe as well as Latin America, a value add tax is imposed on good and service at each state of the production and distribution. So there is a tax. Okay, this value add tax is imposed on good and service at each stage of production and distribution. And to me, it's like, again, the whole point of this type of taxes is not only so, Jesus. So the whole point of these taxes is not necessary to innovate or to promote innovation. It's just to collect something from that. And as I saw, and this is nothing new because after all, government just wants their pie from a particular business. Just like that. They just want a pie from their business. Period. So this is value add tax. Money or a tax, this VAT, value added tax, a tax imposed on good and service at each state. Okay. Value add tax is imposed on good and service at each state of the production and distribution. So the final consumer ultimately pays the full VAT, but each business in the supply chains collect and remit a portion of the tax. So at the end of the at the end of the year or at the end of the day, we are pretty, or users or consumers are the one who ultimately pay for that. Yep. Ultimately pay for that. Jesus. So this is the value add tax. Okay? A tax imposed on good and service at each stage from where at each state of the production and distribution, and the consumers ultimately pays the full VAT, where business at each step of the supply chain remit a portion to that. And then you have ex, uh, excise tax, excise, excise, excise tax, which are taxed to specific good and yet to specific goods such as tobacco, alcohol, guns, uh, gasoline, and the tax is typically included in the price of the item and it is collected by the seller. You also have use tax. This is the tax on goods and services that are purchased out of the state or line and used within the state. Use tax is typically the same rate as the tax is typically the same rate as the state sale tax. Good and service tax, GST. This is a type of sales tax used in several countries, including Australia, Canada, and India. It is a tax on the Australia, Canada, and India. Good and service tax. It is a tax on the value added at each stage of the production and distribution of good and service. Mm, mhm. So okay, those are examples of the sales tax from income tax payable on operating liabilities. Okay, so income tax payables is money that a company owns to the government based on how much revenue it made and a tax rate. So here you have corporate tax, uh, money that money that a corporation have to pay to the government based on a tax rate. On the US is something flat to 21%, but depend on the type of company. It can be LLL, LLC, S Corp, C Corp, you name it. Also, um, exactly. Also, mm, mhm. Also the this is the income. Okay, example of the income tax payable, corporate taxes, withholding taxes, uh, money that the employee deduct from the gross wage or from the gross employee's salary to pay to the government. The whole point of this is to implement the pay as you earn income state tax. Okay, so you don't have to wait at the end of the fiscal year to pay that entire lump sum. and to fight evasion. This is from the government perspective. Okay. And then we have sales tax, such as the state sales tax, city or county sales tax, VAT, value added tax, a tax imposed at each stage of the production and distribution of good and service. And good and service, um, so the consumers ultimately pay the full VAT, but each company at the supply chains remit that to the tax. So remit that portion of the tax. Excise tax on a specific good, and yeah, tax on a specific goods like tobacco, guns, fire, or like tobacco, guns, alcohol, gasoline, and use tax, which is similar to some in the U.S. is typically the same rate as the state sales tax, and the good and service tax (GST). Okay, and the good and service tax (GST), which is a type of sales tax used in several countries, including Australia, Canada, and India. And it is a tax on the value add at each day of the production and distribution of good and service. All right, so this is income. No, this is the income tax payable. Income tax, income taxes payable. Okay, income taxes payable. Short-term borrowings. Okay, short-term borrowings. Jesus. Short-term borrowing and examples. Yeah, payroll deductions. So this is example of short-term borrowings are typically debt that must be repaid within a year or less. So companies often use short-term borrowing to meet their immediate cash flow needs or to finance short-term projects. Some examples of short-term borrowing include bank loans. So companies can obtain short-term loans from banks to meet their working capital needs. These loans are typically repaid within a year and may be secure or insecure. Okay, lines of credits is a type of short-term borrowing that allows a company to borrow money up to a certain limit. Line of credits. The company only pay interest on the amount borrowed, and the loan must be repaid within a specific period of time. Commercial papers. This is a short-term debt instrument issued by companies to raise funds for their short-term financing needs. Commercial papers typically mature within 270 days. 270 days, and it is sold to institutional investors. And it is sold to institutional investors. Trade credits, invoice finance, and payroll advance. This is example of short-term borrowings. Okay, a type of debt that must be paid or that must be repaid within a year or less. So companies often use short-term borrowing to meet their immediate cash flow needs. Exactly. Meaning to pay expense or so company often use short-term borrowing to meet their immediate cash flow need, to pay expense or purchase assets, or to finance short-term projects. Some examples of short-term borrowing include bank loans, line of credit, commercial paper, trade credit, invoice financing, and payroll advance. Yeah, short-term borrowings. So this is another operating liabilities, another common operating liabilities. So far I have saw is accounts payable, money that a company owns to suppliers and vendors, is a short-term debt, 30 to 60 days. So for example, for things like supplier, so raw materials, office supplies, service. Next, accrue expense, money that a company made, or expense that a company made in advance for a good or service that has been received but has not yet paid for, such as wage and salaries, rent, utility bill, uh, taxes. Also, I look at sorry, uh, and also I saw is deferred revenue, which are obligations that a company has to pay for good. Obligations that a company has to provide for good and service that obligations that a company has to provide for money that has been collected. For example, subscription service like Netflix, Spotify, or Shopify, or gift cards. And then I also look at income taxes payable, money that a company owns to the government based on how much income it generates, and a tax rate. So you have corporate taxes. It's gonna depend on the state and the county. But for example, in the US, that is a flat rate, or the federal tax rate is a flat rate of 21%. It may vary depending on the type of corporations, LLL, S corp, C corp. Uh, Also, the withholding taxes, money that an employee deduct from the for the gross employee's salary to pay this government. The whole point of this is to fight tax evasion and to pay taxes or set up pay taxes as you earn. So so to implement okay, so to implement the pay as you earn. No, it's to promote. It's to promote the tax payment system, pay as you earn. That's all. Instead of having to pay taxes at the end of the year, which is a huge amount of money. Uh, so that's so they facilitate that tax collection. And to me, it's funny because it's like, why do you have to collect from? Why do you have to do that? In any case, it's just to just plain here devil advocates is because you have to. So let's say you are a you in your goodwill are going to provide is the best. You in your goodwill, you are going to provide is the best for your citizens, allegedly. But in any case, okay. And then I also look at the sales tax, such as state sales tax, county sales tax. Mm, yeah, county sales tax. Um, I also look. I also saw is yeah, and I know I'm fading away myself too much. Uh, I'll also look at the Value Tax Act, which are tax imposed at every stage of the productions and distribution of good and service. The consumer ultimately pay the full value add tax, and each business at the supply chain remit that tax. Also, the excise tax imposed to certain goods like tobacco, alcohol, gasoline, and firearms. And then I look at the short term borrowing, which is another, from the company perspective, another operating liabilities. Short term borrowing, which is a type of debt that must has a type of debt that must be repaid within a year or less. And company often use this short-term borrowing to meet their immediate cash flow needs, such as purchase assets or pay expense, or to finance short-term projects. Okay, this is the two. Okay, to finance short-term projects or to immediately to meet their immediate cash flow. Okay. hmm Interesting. So this is the short-term borrowing. Okay. Short-term borrowing, after all, uh, is a type of debt that the short-term borrowing is a type of debt that company must repay within a year or less, and they usually do that to meet their cash flow needs, like purchase and purchase assets or pay this expense, or to finance short-term projects. So, for example, you have bank loans. The company can obtain a short-term loan from a bank to meet their working capital needs. These loans are typically repaid within a year or and may be secure or unsecure. Okay. After all, bank loans, line of credits, okay, lines of credit. A line of credit is a type of short-term borrowing that allows a company to borrow money up to a certain limit. The company only pays interest on the amount borrowed, and the loan must be repaid within a specific period of time. Commercial papers. This is a short-term debt instrument issued by companies to raise funds for their short-term financial needs. Commercial papers. Trade credits. Company can also obtain short-term financing by using trade credits, which allows them to defer payment for good or service they have purchased from suppliers. I don't think people use trade credit or company use trade credit. They have an immense leverage for them. hmm It's a business-to-business agreement in which a, cons- a customer can purchase goods without paying cash upfront and pay the supplier at later scheduled date. Mhm. 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 So trade credit, and invoice financing. This is a type of short-term borrowing that allows company to borrow money against their outstanding invoice. The lender provides funds upfront based on the value of the invoice, and the company repay the loans when the invoice are paid. The lender provides funds upfront based on the value of the invoice, and the company repays the loan when the invoices are paid. Payroll advance. Company may offer short-term loans to employees in the form of a payroll advance, which allows employee to access a portion of their salary before payday. These advances are typically repaid through payroll deductions. The payroll advance, invoice financing, trade credits, and commercial paper, line of credits, and bank loans. Mm. So from all of this, I should have a line of credit or bank loans. Completely, man. I should have a line of credit here. I should definitely have a line of credit. Mhm. Line of credit. Line of credit. Mm. Okay. Okay. This is another operating liabilities. Short-term borrowing, which are debt that a company has to repay within a year or less. And they do that, yeah, expense that a company has or a debt that a company has to repay within a year or less for or to meet their cash flow needs to pay its expense or purchase assets or to finance short-term projects. So for example, you have bank loans, line of credit is a line of credit of borrowing that allows a company to borrow money up to certain limit. The company only pay interest on the amount borrowed, and the loan must be repaid within a specific period of time. Commercial paper, okay, this is a short-term debt instrument issued by companies. So you have bank loans. So company, uh, yeah, bank loans. So short-term loans from banks, line of credit, which has a limit of how much money a company can borrow. Okay. How much money a company can borrow, line of credit. So to put it simple, bank loans, loans that a company, so loans that a bank issue to companies. Okay, so bank loans, so short-term loans from banks. Line of credit is how much money a company can borrow from a uh, yeah, how much money a company can borrow for a specific period and a certain limit. Commercial paper are a debt instrument issued by corporations to raise funds. Trade credits, short-term financing by using trade credits, which allows them to defer payment for good or service they have purchased from suppliers. Invoice financing, okay, invoice financing and payroll advance. So that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.